Thank you all for coming. My name is Busza. I'm a current senior, and this is my senior thesis titled Tortuous Love, Reflections on Failed Love Relationships in the Classical Orchestra. That's why. Do you want me to start again? Okay, cool. I'm gonna place this down on the ground. Take two, everybody. I'm leaving you. My project is titled Tortuous Love, Failed Love Relationships in the Ancient World for Reflection. Thank you. Turn down the light, turn down the bed, turn down these voices inside my head. Lay down with me, tell me no lie. Just hold me close, don't patronize me. Don't patronize me. 'Cause I can't make you love me if you don't. You can't make your heart feel something it won't. Here in the dark, in these final hours, I will lay down my heart when I feel the power, but you don't. No, you don't. 'Cause I can't make you love me if you don't. If you don't. Close my eyes so I don't see the love you don't feel when you're holding me. Morning will come and I'll do what's right. Just give me until then to give up this fight, and I will give up this fight. 'Cause I can't make you love me if you don't. And you can't make your heart feel something it won't. Here in the dark, in these final hours, I will lay down my heart when I feel the power that you don't. No, you don't. 'Cause I can't make you love me if you don't. If you don't. How do people fall in love? You know, the meet-cute romance, hookups turned hubby, college class crush, high school sweetheart, roses and chocolates, damsel in distress, long distance, long term, maybe this time kind of love. Because I've tried. Chased, pined, and flirted with the pain and emotional scars to prove such. Every time I hoped to land, to be caught and cherished, I am witness to just how wonderfully hard the right. All throughout my life, I have been told by movies, TV shows, and books, by music, and even the people around me that true love is out there. That everyone deserves a great love story, and one day they will find it. Cutting to the present as a 22-year-old gay man, having never had a relationship, I've begun to doubt that claim. Because it isn't for a lack of wanting to find love, or taking opportunities, or putting myself out there. I've spent countless days daydreaming about what it might be like to sit on the beach with a boyfriend. I've sat scrolling through fan fiction stories on the internet for hours to just get a hint of what being in love would feel like. I've downloaded every dating app on the store that is even remotely worthwhile, and I've met people who I've fallen very hard, very quickly for. And yet, I have nothing to show for it. Oftentimes, in my writing or my thoughts, I have put forth the idea that maybe I am destined to be alone. That even though I may want to experience true romantic love so desperately, fate has other plans. Perhaps I may even be a god of love unrequited. It is those experiences of falling for someone so deeply and then not having those feelings reciprocated that inspired this project. Going into this project, I had two goals in mind. First, I wanted to know what unrequited and rejected love looked like in the lives of the ancients, because it is in seeing how people within a world so operationally different from my own dealt with this hardship in love that maybe I could begin to understand for myself the purpose inside all of this hurt. I will guide you through my journey living that process. However, my second goal was something even more than that. You see, this thesis is based in scholarly research and analysis, grounding itself in the cultures of classical Greece and Rome. But at its core, this project was personal to my experiences in what seems like constant failed love. With that being the case, this project is two-sided. Half of it has been typical thesis-level research, and the other half has been personal creative endeavors, to take what I have learned in my research and reflect that in my own view of modern living. And like that of the ancients, that is why part of this presentation takes on the mode of a performance, to be a lived medium of creative expression. Some may believe that scholarship can only be defined as entirely research or entirely creative. In designing what form this thesis would take at the beginning of this process a year ago, we wanted to explore the possibility that the creative and analytic research categories can exist as a unified form within the field of classical studies. So here we go. I started with my definitions, as any good research project should. In the world of ancient Greece, and somewhat in the world of ancient Rome, there are many different words for love. In English, we have love, and that is kind of a catch-all. But in ancient Greece, there are four main types of love, shown up here. You have philia, which is a reciprocal type of love that often is found in friendships. You have agape, which is a universal understanding of kindness and compassion that people would show to each other, which now has been taken in the context of the New Testament to mean the love that God has unconditionally for humans. We have eros, which, as most people know, is sexual love and desire. It is a type of love that is usually not reciprocated, and it is mostly felt on one side. And it can be reciprocated, it can be felt by both people, but oftentimes it does not have to be, and it does not. Finally, there is storge, which is the love you experience as a family member, especially as a parent to one's children. So, having defined my terms, I turned to what it might actually be like to be a person in the ancient world. I turned towards some material culture, as any good classicist would. Up here, I have 3 different images of pottery from the ancient world of Greece and Rome, and it depicts women's lives specifically. I start with women's lives because usually the context of marriage and love was with heterosexual couples and with women and men. So the top picture is that of a woman getting ready for a marriage. The bottom 2 are actually hetairae, which are considered the ancient Greek prostitutes. And in looking at these different types of women and the fact that they can have love in their relationships, they can have love in their marriage, but it's not and they can have a type of love in their sex lives. It's not necessarily always good. There are times when a marriage, like in the case against Eratosthenes, where a husband can often beat his wife and a slave. There are times in prostitutes' lives where they are treated as nothing more than a manifestation of desires. But at the same time, you can still have love. And if we take a look at these women and the positions that they're in and the context of some of what they're doing, don't we find ourselves in them? Don't we find ourselves doing the same things that these people so long ago also did? So maybe they do understand what it's like to not feel reciprocated in your love. And I have to address Greek homosexuality because but at the same time, it's also important to know the context of Greek homosexuality in the ancient world. Up here, you see 3 different images of the relationship between 2 men. Oftentimes, the relationship between 2 men was educational in nature. It was designed so that an older man would enter into a partnership with a younger man, specifically because of that older man's eros, that sexual, not necessarily reciprocated desire. The older man would be called the erastes, and the younger man would be called the eromenos. It does not mean that there wasn't other types of love within that relationship either, though. It does not mean that there were other types of relationships in that love. There were philia and storge and all of these different emotions at once. They were trying to instill a respect upon these young men, and it wasn't necessarily a function of exchange of love entirely. And we see that the positions that they are in are not unlike the positions that we can take in our own lives. And me, as a gay man, sees myself somewhat in the ancient world represented, though in a very different context than what we have today. So knowing all of that, I turned to literary texts. I found three in drama that I necessarily wanted to look at. The first is Clytemnestra in the Agamemnon, and the fact that because of the death of her daughter at the hands of her husband Agamemnon, she took it upon herself to kill him and his new bride. There is clearly a theme in tragedy, because all of these plays are tragedies, of the negative emotions and the strife and the pain that one can feel that ends a relationship. Because this project is not only about unrequited love, but about love that has failed, or love that fails to start. So I needed to look at other types of love rather than just unrequited love to get a sense of what it meant to be feeling all this pain and strife. I turn next to Antigone, which Maddie had also referenced in her presentation. The Antigone is mainly focused on our main character, Antigone, and the fact that her brother, Polynices, is not being honored with a proper burial because the king has declared him a traitor, and thus he does not deserve a burial. Antigone loves her brother, loves both of her brothers, who have both died in the war. But it is that love for her brother that causes her to lose love for others. For example, Ismene, her sister, she tells her that she feels betrayed by the act of her not supporting her outright in trying to bury her brother. And because she buries her brother, Antigone goes up against Creon, who is her uncle, and they both demolish each other at the seams in the most poignant argument and the most critical argument in the entire play. And then finally, what I find most important is Antigone is betrothed to Haman, who is Creon, the king's son. Antigone and Haman are supposedly in a loving relationship, and they will be wed. But that doesn't play out. And it is Antigone who, in going against Creon, ends this relationship. She effectively gets herself killed. And in a dramatic monologue at the end of the play, she says that if I had children, I wouldn't have done what I did. But if my husband had died, if I had children, I wouldn't have done what I did, but even if my husband had died, I would have still gone through with it. Essentially, she's saying that the marriage doesn't necessarily matter to her. Her love for her brother overcomes that of her love for her fiancé. And so she kills herself, and in the process, she kills Haman. Doesn't necessarily sound like the most successful relationship to me. Finally, we have Medea. Medea was taken aboard the Argonauts' ship with Jason, and they end up in, I forget the city. They end up in Corinth, that's the city. And Jason decides that he's going to take a new wife in order to regain the possible power he could have had in Colchis. Because of that, he forsakes his marriage to Medea. And Medea has the most visceral response to not being loved back out of all three of these plays. She is in a severe depression, and yet she wants revenge. She's hurt so much by the rejection of her love, the fact that she gave up her home life, her life as a princess, that she has used all of her magic to be able to make Jason stay alive and succeed. She's given up so much and gets nothing in return. And that causes her an immense amount of pain to the point that she decides, I'm going to get back at him by not only killing his new bride and the bride's father, the king, but I'm also going to kill my children with him because I want him to have nothing, because he has left me with nothing, because he was my everything. We then go to poetry. I examined both common and long-form epic poetry when I decided to go about this. In the more common poetry, we have Sappho and Catullus, and in the long-form poetry, we have Homer and Virgil. In Virgil's Aeneid, Dido is the queen of Carthage. Dido is caused by Venus in conjunction with Juno to fall in love with Aeneas, the hero of the story who's supposed to found Rome. In falling in love with him, she cannot... in falling in love with him, and in him sort of being forced to consummate the marriage in a cave caused by a storm by both Venus and Juno, she believes that they are married. Granted, Dido was married before. Dido had a husband who died by her brother because of greed. She forsakes her old wedding vows because of her new fiery passion for Aeneas. Aeneas is then told by Mercury, sent by Jupiter, that he needs to go and found Rome after a long time of being in Carthage. When he tries to essentially sneak away, he is confronted by Dido. And he doesn't recognize the marriage that they had. And he doesn't offer any alternative for her. When he leaves, and leaves her in ruin emotionally, she doesn't know what to do with herself. And so she asks her sister to build a pyre to burn, essentially, quote unquote, burn all of Aeneas' things. It is then that she decides she's going to kill herself on top of this pyre, out of love for Aeneas that was not returned. Also, I want to mention Sappho's poetry is top tier, and also is so moving in that it is able to describe a gentle kind of love, different than the pictures of Erastes and Erymanos that oftentimes depict a very rough, raw, distinctly heavy type of love. Whereas Sappho and even Catullus have a way of describing their emotions around love and their feelings around love in a way that is more sensuous and soft and caring and gentle. So with that being said, we move on to the Odyssey. In the Odyssey, there are two women that Odysseus meets that want to enter into partnerships with him. The first of which is Circe, on the right. Circe is the witch who turns his men into pigs or boars, and he confronts her, and because he is given a specific plant by the gods to avoid her magic, he is able to stop her, and she decides that she's going to then be hospitable and give him food, give him the supplies he needs, and they go to bed together. And it is in staying with him that Circe eventually realizes that he is not going to be there forever. And so instead of doing something that she might regret, she decides that she's going to help him by first sending him to the underworld to get information, and then to give him two options to be on his way. Calypso, on the other hand, is a little bit more reluctant. Calypso is stuck on an island based on the circumstances of who she is. Odysseus gets trapped on her island and is said to be trapped on her island at the beginning of the Odyssey. The gods then decide to intervene and say that Odysseus is not destined to die on your island, is not destined to live forever on your island. And so even though Calypso has him captured, essentially, and he is forced to lay with her at night, he's forced to stay there, he's forced to be her husband, she lets him go. However, she has no boat, and she's not going to make one for him. So, as a final send-off, she makes him build his own boat, and also, in retaliation to the gods, sort of claims that the gods don't want goddesses to fall in love with mortals, that they are being hypocritical. So sometimes failed love, in general, is not based on the emotions of another person, but is based off of being taken away from you. The final of the epic poems that I'm going to cover is the Iliad. The Iliad is the story of the last 50 days of the Trojan War. I emphasize the relationship between Patroclus and Achilles in my paper because the relationship that they have is so uniquely deep and is so uniquely tragic. Patroclus, when he was young, accidentally killed another boy while playing a game. Because of that, he then gets sent to the land of Achilles and becomes Achilles' father's ward. But at the same time, becomes very close with Achilles, and they grow up as very close friends, including as Patroclus acting as his advisor, as a guide, as a friend. In the Trojan War, in Homer's Iliad, we see that many times Patroclus can do things that other people can't, for and to Achilles. When Achilles wore prize of Briseis, who he also says he loves, when his war prize is taken away from him, he refuses to fight in the war out of principle for having been stolen his glory. It is Patroclus who sees people dying on the front lines and goes to Achilles and tells him that he's being cowardly. He tells him that, how could you let people do this? How could you let people die when you are the reason that we would win this war? No one else would stand up to Achilles like that. Everyone else is afraid of him because he is a demigod, because he is so powerful. Not Patroclus. So Achilles decides to let Patroclus go onto the front lines and fight and lead the army to fight the Trojans. But he gives him a stipulation that you cannot go further than the walls. You need to come back. Because he states that he wishes him and Patroclus to not be the ones to sacrifice their lives before the city is taken. He wants to take the city together with him. Patroclus goes and fights. And he goes too far. And because of this, Apollo, and then another soldier, and then finally Hector, end his life. And his final words, the literal last word that he says, is Achilles. Achilles, because of Patroclus' death, is so distraught that he goes into full mourning practices. He rips out his hair, he dirties his body. And it is only because of Patroclus' death that he starts fighting in the war again. And what's tragic about the two of them is that Achilles knew that he was going to die in the war. But in trying to keep Patroclus alive, he wanted to keep him alive because even though he was going to die, Patroclus could live on for the both of them. And now, neither of them get to live. And it is only when Patroclus' ghost comes to Achilles and says, I need you to bury me so that I can move on, unless you want me to be a shade wandering the earth for the rest of time, that he then is able to say goodbye to his friend in this life. His friend in arms, his lover, and I quote, man he loves above all others. I mentioned Apollo being the one who first shot at Patroclus and was the start of his downfall. Apollo is the god of many things. He's the god of the sun. He's the god of prophecy. He's the god of medicine. He's the god of music and art. He's the god of archery. But I seem to think that he could also be called the god of love unrequited. Because even though there are many stories where Apollo finds love, Apollo has children by women, and he is able to successfully get love, the staggering amount of stories that exist where he doesn't find love seems to me that with those in mind, he could be called the god of unrequited love. So we start with the story of Hyacinth. Hyacinth was a lover of Apollo. When they were playing discus together, either by an act of revenge from the wind, because Hyacinth rejected his advances in favor of Apollo's, or just by accident, Hyacinth is hit by a discus that he threw and is fatally wounded. And it's because of this that Apollo mourns and turns him into the hyacinth flower. A flower that he will sing his grief over for eternity. Cyparissus was another male lover of Apollo. Cyparissus had a pet deer that he loved dearly. He accidentally killed this deer, and as a result, he decided, I don't want to live anymore. I want to be in grief forever over the deed that I have done. And even though Apollo tells him that he shouldn't have to worry, he lets him transform. And he transforms into the cypress tree, which Apollo says that people will grieve under over their loved ones and friends. But it's not just about accidental death that separates Apollo and his lovers. We also have times where Apollo's lovers choose somebody else over him. Marpessa was a woman who he fell in love with, and she also was pursued by Idas. Both of them fought over her, and eventually Zeus had to separate them and have Marpessa choose. And she chose Idas because to her, he had to choose. She chose him because Apollo would get tired of her, because she was mortal and he was immortal. Admetus was a farmer or a shepherd, and he had flocks. Apollo, as a punishment for killing either the serpent or the Cyclopes, was forced to be a slave underneath be a squire underneath a mortal for a year, and he chose Admetus. Admetus was kind and caring, and many translations and many translations of many works have Apollo as his lover, Apollo as feeling fiery passion for Admetus. But Admetus instead decides to marry Alcestis. Alcestis is the daughter of a king, and it requires that animals be brought to the king in order to be able to marry Alcestis. Apollo does this for him. Even though he feels all of these emotions for him, he decides, I'm going to help you get love because, in my opinion, he wants it to be happy. But even more so, there are lovers that do it for the wrong reasons. There are lovers who decide that they want to engage with Apollo for only his gifts and not much else. The Cumaean Sibyl was a priestess of Apollo at Cumae, and when the god Apollo visited her and wanted to engage with her in sex and love, he offered her any gift of her choosing. And she picked up a pile of sand and said, I want as many birthdays as this pile of sand. He allowed her this, and he said that he would allow her even more, the gift of eternal beauty, eternal youth, if she slept with him. She refused his advances, and because of this, she still had the gift of 1,000 years of life, but her body would decay severely over time. Even though Apollo wanted to love her, because she did not love him back, he got his own way of revenge on her. And similarly too, Cassandra was a lover of Apollo. And she wanted the gift of prophecy, so he gave that to her. When she also refused his advances, Apollo decided, I can't take away my gift from you, but what I will do is curse you, so that no one will ever understand your prophecies. No one will ever believe them. And you will have all of this knowledge and no use for it. Again, he wants to love someone, but they use him only for what he can give them. And so out of love turned to anger and even hatred, he curses. Finally, we have Daphne. Daphne was a nymph who Apollo, after defeating the Python at Delphi, fell in love with. The story goes that once he defeated the Python, Eros was seen with a bow. Because he is the god of archery, he told Eros to not encroach on his functions as a god. So Eros, as a result of this insult, decides, I'm going to shoot you with a love arrow, and I'm going to shoot Daphne with what is essentially an anti-love arrow. So Daphne, for the rest of her life, feels no love towards anyone. She feels no sexual, no romantic. By modern terms, we would call her asexual, aromantic. Apollo feels everything for her. When he finally decides to observe her and approach her, she runs away. He chases after her, and when he gets close enough to almost kiss her neck and, grab her, she shouts to her father, a river, if you wish to save me, please, I beg of you, I wish to remain a virgin for my life. And transform me into something, because my form is what causes so many people to fall in love with me. She then transforms into a tree, and it's from this tree where Apollo's laurel wreaths originated. Having someone run away from you, which happens in multiple accounts of failed loves, how much do you think that hurts? I said that this presentation was part creative. Every time I researched something, I reflected on it in poetry and in writing. When I reflected on Apollo, I decided to write an epic of myself. And I will perform that for you now. Apollo, if you can hear me, grant this mortal an audience. I come seeking ancient gods for modern problems because you just might know me. And I don't know why I am me, but I know that we are not so dissimilar. It isn't exactly mirror images, but in that mirror is something, a something for which we are, or were, together unfortunate. Why must you be the patron deity of he, the failed lover? So here I stand, and if you so demand there will be lyrics, hear this. I'll sing this out because self-knowledge, a task over which you preside, is overdue. In an epic, I seek to weave with threads of a human life steeped in tortuous love. This is my myth. But because it's my myth, I preface by stating that I have not edited. Nothing's retracted, redacted, or rewritten. There's no morsels under carpets, no vacuuming Hoover. There's neither polish till it shines, nor polish remover, no Apollo. This is raw, real, naked exposition. It's acoustic, and if it's somehow you that was the one who took my loving and ill-fated the conclusion, I want you to see how you've abused it, that you've used your godhood to make of me a memory, a mimicry of your many lost loves. Let it begin. In my youth, I'm dancing around the living room, blanket dress tied at the waist. I'm stealing the heels during dress-up because I want to feel pretty. Against the teacher's stare, I think, no, I don't care if it's for the girls. Or maybe I do. Because all I wanted to do was love and be loved. I want my parents, my teachers, my God, everybody to love me. Earning that love was now my mission. To listen and do as told, to win and win and win and stay a brimming paragon, pure as gold. In crafting a goal higher than Icarus flew, more than to reach, but to be you, the sun, my wish to ascend is no longer innocent. I am no longer content with the mortal plane, and I yearn to be like a god, yet I don't strive as a vain antagonist collecting power. My perfection is selfless, to be given as gifts without reciprocity. And that is what you find for your reason to love me. So I lay foundation on absolutes, station what might agree absolutely opposites. I'm to want love far from wanton craved desire, as sexual stimulus is dim and should provoke in me an ire. Of that human urge I tire and believe it not needed, defeated if I but stay the course. Of course, to be less human. A farce it is to love apart from embrace, but I'm willing to play that part and brace for a love with no impact. Intimacy must not I be. And yet there is a growing worry within him that he's going to fall behind, off track. He can't let go of the fact that everyone around him is hand-holding, showing the signs of young love. It's a pressure that builds and builds and builds. He doesn't seem to understand why he hasn't made the jump and started to find another with whom he can begin to check the boxes off. In a moment of panic, where the question of who he likes is more than capable of tearing heaven from earth, he chooses a girl. But he can't get past his mental fortifications, which constantly stop him from escaping the nightmare of a record playing in his head, forcing him to look about how insufficient his body, looks, swagger are compared to the real men among his peers. He believes himself jealous, because why else would someone obsess over the fact that every other boy looks so good? Flying in the wind during recess, how they're skilled enough to make those kinds of spirals with nothing but a curved object made of rubber. Visions of old friends and trends, the ties to a school he outgrew years ago, finally dissipate. What's left for him is to anticipate and listen to the sage advice of people who have been in his corner, both naturally and by choice, and let himself feel. Just slightly, though. One only gets the chance to reset when the gods are feeling generous. And he's not going to mess this up. But, ever the cautious one, he reaches through the unsure spaces of his mind and tries to know thyself, ever so briefly. There's a glimpse of something not scary, so to speak, but uncomfortable, unquestionably new and unlike what he could have possibly prepared for. This little peek behind the curtain only allows the rest to follow. The feelings center on a boy. He's 1 year older, acts 2 years younger, and is a complete buffoon. geeky gamer boy who sits with all the rest of them, bonding over fantasy wars via little monsters in piles. And he even shows me how much money he spent buying shiny cardboard to play with. I love it. There's muscle to him, tastefully so for a swimmer, and it goes in harmony with the music he makes and is. His hair is Bieber-esque, which is only a slight embarrassment for mid-2010s, and I'm slowly realizing that eyes, especially the pretty ones, could be assessed like gems. Connected through music and magic, we end up on a bus bound for the capital. I sing the whole way there and forget that I'm questioning how I feel about the other boys around me. My roommate is even closer friends with you, and it's one night where everything changes. I'm invited by proxy to pay your room a visit, immediately greeted by bare photos of you and your friend that you and your friend have decided to take and snap. It's a quick glance at your naked frame, yet the momentary want requires I have another. The rest of the night flies by on your bed watching some forgettable film. Forgettable because all I'm watching is how your body curves just right, how your pajamas make your butt look cute and hide your pretty legs. The remaining days are spent being your puppy dog, following you around since I've never known the experience of being completely whipped before. On the return trip, I pretend to steal your sunglasses. Maybe you'll want them, and when you decide to come find them, also realize you want me. I get home, a mountain of work and no sleep, greeting me at the door, yet I can't be bothered by the mundane when existentially I'm shifting. Like Cinderella at the stroke of midnight, I timidly walk to my mother. I'm terrified of what might happen when she realizes I'm different, even though Mike's the same and nothing ever seemed amiss. I utter the words embarrassingly slow. The world doesn't end. But in a way it does, as when I tell you my truth and I'm crossing my fingers that maybe you're secretly gay like me, you have nothing to say in return. Countlessly, my cycle repeats. I admire the aesthetic beauty of boys alongside me in this Catholic male wilderness, returned by the reality of my locale. My years alter relatively little, trying to fight every romantic emotion and distract myself with schoolwork, like it's heartbreak painkillers. Then you. How do I start with you? It starts when football gets traded in for theater. You impress the leader of our acting cult and are rightfully inducted. I realized that my life would be simpler bumming rides home in your shotgun seat, and that car is where we begin. It starts with music, showing you that my taste is not completely trash, and music turns to words. We talk in general about nothing then unmasking itself as everything. If there had been reservations at the start of this companionship, they're gone after you talk about having no money in a home with 4 kids and another on the way. I learn, albeit slowly, about how you have grown to be a beautifully complex flower amidst the cracked pavement of a broken home. We find ourselves passing the aux and being idiots in that wonderful piece of junk. You talk about comics and games and show that your skeleton in the closet is a closet nerd who has played regionals for Pokemon and dressed as Spider-Man for Comic-Con. As if your inner personhood wasn't enough. You are the most beautiful human I have had the pleasure of knowing. You're younger than me, and yet, who's the one with the beard, the pecs, abs, and arms? Your hands are rough because life became that way for you. Your hair is always a mess, but god damn it if I don't want to brush it out of your face and get one more sense of you. However, I'd never do that to you. No one deserves to be intimate before they're ready. What that girl did to you all those years ago was not okay. I would never treat you that way. You know I'd treat you right. I do. I want to. If I'm honest, though, I want more. I want you. Unprompted, you once said, if only I was a woman, were you gay, then we could be in us. I refused to tell you how my heart raced and pined to feel the love that you have to give. And I sat there suffering. Suffering through you telling me about your new crush. how she is your type exactly, has your humor, gets you. Now I begin waiting before heading home with you anymore, because you're busy sucking face in some closet, corridor, or classroom with the girl I wish I could replace. She breaks your heart, and my heart does the same, watching you crumble over some girl who couldn't appreciate your personage. I coach you through the pain, and in return, you begin to advocate for my own health, that it should be something I pay attention to. During the next show, you get a girlfriend, and I'm back to waiting by the car while you're busy doing something that I would have killed to do with you. It's a cold night after a performance. I'm waiting for you to take me home, even though I could have left before, because I want to spend time with you. Even if I can't be more with you, I'll take some kind of bond over nothing. Later and later, the clock moves on, and I don't know where you are. I get to the car and notice how foggy the windows are. I see movement and realize I have officially become an afterthought, and that you're fucking her in the same car where I actually met you. My poor heart couldn't take the reality that I don't matter to you. But I didn't take it out on you, banging on the windows and screaming, no. Like I'm always used to, I live in the pain that accompanies silence. I move on to another institution of study. By way of advancement, I become more free, yet ultimately remain more timid. It's in college where I begin to wonder whether I'm just too prude, that I'm stuck in a perpetuating cycle of not doing romantic, sexual, real things for the sole reason of not having done them originally. I decide that I just need to man up, to just go in and get laid, as so many people enticed me. Enter the application of horror, which defines gay circles. I download the app only to immediately delete. And it's quite comical how quickly I rescinded on my plan. No, not this time. Over a period of weeks, I began a vicious cycle. Download, scroll, message, tap, delete. The idea was to stay a fringe user, and that was my way, that way my perfection, that hope to be an example, a paragon, a beacon, an idol for the human race, could remain intact. You aren't the type of person to send those kind of pictures. Wrong. I sent pictures, and I sent a lot of them. I would still endlessly delete and renew, but now I was pushing myself to embrace sexuality in such a direct way. If I was going to break me of my prudish ways, it was going to be very uncomfy. I would never meet because it would never work, until it did. When I pressed send, telling a complete stranger to pick me up, my heart doesn't wish to be constrained inside my chest any longer. It's when I'm walking up to open his car door that my amygdala screams at me. I'm not ready. You better be. I'm not comfortable. Too bad. I don't want this. Oh, yes, you fucking do. Please, no. I trip running back to my room because I can't move to the bathroom fast enough. Every inch of my body needs to be clean if I don't wish to do something I regret, though it's already too late for that. Eventually, I'm relatively calmed, but the shock, the guilt, the loss of worth doesn't go away. And I only hope it doesn't affect my future pursuit of sex, love, and affection when I'm finally ready. We reach the present. I've since dated, checked off my boxes of firsts, and relatively broken the horrid cycle that got me here. However, there is no happy ending. No true love's kiss, chapel bells, or budding romance. No one has ever been my equal. Believe me, I've tried. The countless hours I've spent swiping and texting, editing how people see me. The never-ending disappointment I receive when, once again, dating doesn't get past 2 weeks. That resentment, mixed with understanding after someone texts to break things off, saying things like, I'm just not ready. I've got some things to sort out. You're sweet, but I just want sex. So, Apollo, If this reaches your shores, rest assured that on some level, I resonate with you. If only we could be so lucky as to fall in love and have it stick at the landing. I call my conclusion finding closure because some words. So what does all this amount to? In each area of my research, it seems to be that unrequited love is a powerful and tragic thing. And in the case of Apollo, it's a consistent occurrence. In reflection of my own life then, I had to think, am I just like Apollo? Fated time and time again to try at love and fail in achieving something lasting, deep, and profound. Is the act of pursuing love even worth it if I am somehow, by nature or by destiny, incapable of being loved? In going through this process, I believe it to still be worthwhile. I think that if you had told me to believe that years ago, I would have dismissed it entirely. I would have felt as though I should succumb to my fate as single and alone. I would have read into the relationships of people around me saying how they fight and argue, how I wouldn't want to pursue a relationship when it requires that someone accept every part of you, the good, the bad, and the very, very ugly. I wanted love without the pain, without the hard work. I wanted an idealized love, an idyllic relationship. I wanted perfection. What I realized is that the worth I wouldn't allow myself to recognize was its own form of love. Philautia, the act of self-love. And it is within recognition of this love that I have to realize I am worthy of love. I can be enough for someone else, and I don't need to minimize or change myself. And the risk involved with forming a relationship with another person is always going to be there. Someone can hurt you, push your buttons, and make you feel upset, and you can do the same. But it is that risk that makes the potential reward all the more better. That someone chooses to love you and cares about you enough to forgive your mistakes and accept your faults. It is then up to me to forgive myself enough to accept that, even though I may continue to fall again and again in pursuit of love. It is possible that I can find someone to feel a requited kind of love for once. The trying and attempting is a function of getting here, but maybe it is worth it. Maybe. But what would you get? Here's to starting once more, because the goal was never supposed to be a post, rigid and unforgiving, all or nothing. As simple as that claims to be, it fails our reality, because we fail. We get tired, beaten, bested, made to be fools and fiends. No, a goal is elastic. It's stretchy and pliable, shining light in a direction but never resting on a place. Because the guide shouldn't give the answers meant to be discovered in the woods, nor were the woods an easy choice to make. You could have stayed where you began. Trying to get someplace and failing versus failing to go at all. Those are distinct. Burn it into your skull now. Pride doesn't come from perfect starts and flawlessness. Pride is saying you crossed a finish line, destined never to haunt you again. Someone to hold you too close, someone to hurt you too deep, someone to sit in your chair and ruin your sleep.
That's true, but there's more than that. Is that all you think there is to it?
You've got so many reasons for not being with someone. But Jordan, you haven't got one good reason for being alone.
Come on, Jordan, you're onto something. You're onto something.
Someone to need you too much. Someone to know you too well. Someone to pull you up short, to put you through hell.
See what you look for, you know? You're not a kid anymore, Jordan. I don't think you'll ever be a kid again, kiddo. Hey, don't be afraid that it won't return. The only thing to be afraid of, really, is that it won't be.
Don't stop now. Keep going.
Someone you have to let in. Someone whose feelings you spare. Someone who, like it or not, will want you to share a little, a lot.
And what does all that mean?
Jordan, how do you know so much about it when you've never been there?
It's much better living it than looking at it, Jordan.
Add 'em up, Jordan. Add 'em up.
Someone to crowd you with love. Someone to force you to care. Someone to make you come through, who'll always be there, as frightened as you of being alive. Being alive. Being alive. Being alive.
Blow out the candles, Jordan, and make a wish. Want something. Want something.
Somebody hold me too close. Somebody hurt me too deep. Somebody sit in my chair and ruin my sleep and make me aware of being alive. Of being alive. Somebody need me too much. Somebody know me too well. Somebody pull me up short and put me through hell and give me support for being alive. Make me alive. Make me alive. Make me confused. Mock me with praise. Let me be used. Vary my days. But alone is alone. Not alive. Somebody crowd me with love. Somebody force me to care. Somebody let me come through. I'll always be there, as frightened as you of being alive. Being alive. Being alive. Being